Warriors cross swords beneath the gaze of the ancient gods.
私の活躍見せてあげる
You can duck the last hit of Cassandra, her AAA, or you can use the tech crouch move to beat the last hit. Just make sure that you don't use a low or special mid, because Cassandra might jump over it. You also have the possibility to beat the last hit of her AAA with an auto GI for horizontal high attacks. And because you can use an auto GI to beat the last hit, normal GIs will work as well. Cassandra, her AK is minus 12 on block. You can also beat the second hit of her AK with a normal GI. The last hit of her A6 AA can be ducked. And although ducking the last hit is the safer option and guarantees you a damaging punish, you also have the option to beat the last hit with a normal GI. You can duck the second hit of Cassandra, her 6AA, but there is a mix-up here with her 6AB. But you can fuzzy guard under the high of her 6AA and still block the mid of her 6AB. And you also have the option to beat the second hit with a normal GI, which will also beat her 6AB. The second hit of Cassandra, her 6AB, can be sidestepped to either side, but this will lose to her 6AA. Or you can also beat the second hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks, but this will also lose to her 6AA. And like I've mentioned before, you can also use a normal GI to beat the second hit of her 6AB, which will also beat her 6AA. Her 3A is minus 12 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted and even can be delayed. Cassandra, her 3AK is minus 14 on block, but has a little bit of pushback, so make sure that your I-14 punish has enough range. There are some characters such as Asta, Haomaru, Setsuka and Siegfried who can sidestep the second hit of her 3AK to their left, but most characters will only be able to sidestep the delayed version to either side. You can also use an auto GI for vertical mid kicks to beat the second hit, but this will most likely only work against the delayed version. Or you can use a normal GI against the second hit of her 3AK, which will beat the normal version and the delayed version at the same time. You can sidestep the second hit of her Divine Force 3A A+B to either side, but this might lose to her 3AK depending on your character. Or you can use the normal GI to beat the second hit, which will also beat her 3AK and the delayed 3AK. Cassandra, her 1A is minus 14 on block, but returns to crouching, so you'll have to punish her with a mid or low. And because her 1A will leave her in a crouching position, this means that you will be able to attempt a low throw after blocking it. Cassandra's full crouch 3A is minus 14 on block. Her Wild Rising A is minus 12 on block, but be careful because her fully held version is only minus 2 on block. Cassandra, her Jump A is minus 14 on block, but has a follow-up which can only be interrupted by jump attacks. And it will also leave her quite far away from you. Her Jump AK is also minus 14 on block. You also have the possibility to beat the second hit with a jump attack for a more damaging punish. Or if you have access to one, you can also beat the second hit with an auto GI for horizontal low kicks. And like always, because you can use an auto GI, you will also be able to use a normal GI. The last hit of Cassandra, her BBB, can be sidestepped to either side. You can also duck the last hit of her BBB, which will also work if you got hit by the initial BB, but this will lose to her BBB6. Or you can interrupt the last hit with an I-12 attack, but it can't be a low or special mid because Cassandra will jump over it. Just like her BBB, you can also sidestep the last hit of her BBB6 to either side. Most characters will also be able to step to the right even after getting hit by her BB, but this will then lose to her BBB. You also have the option to interrupt the last hit with an up to I-14 attack, but you should use an I-12 mid or high to also beat her BBB. Or you can use an auto GI for vertical mid attacks to beat the last hit, but this will lose to her BBB. And of course this means that you will also be able to use a normal GI, but this will lose to her BBB as well. The second hit of Cassandra, her B hold, can be sidestepped to either side, but depending on your character this might lose to her BK. And you also have the option to interrupt the second hit with an I-10 attack, but this will lose to her BK as well. And you can also use an auto GI for vertical mid attacks to beat the second hit, but this again will lose to her BK. Or you can use a normal GI to beat the second hit, which will also beat her BK. Very few characters such as Jolly Side Tira and Asta can actually sidestep the second hit of Cassandra, her BK, to the right side. To beat the second hit of her BK, most characters will have to duck it, but this will lose to her B hold. And to beat the second hit, you can also use a normal GI, which, like I mentioned before, will also beat her B hold. Cassandra, her B2 is -14 on block, but will only be -12 at tip range. Also be aware that her B2 hold is only -2 on block. The second hit of Cassandra's 6BB can be sidestepped to the right side by a couple of characters such as Jolly Side Tira and Changhua. It is also possible to beat the second hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks, but your auto GI will need a 4-frame startup. But this will also lose to her 6BB hold and her Divine Force 6B A+B. And you can also use the normal GI to beat the second hit, which will also beat her Divine Force 6B A+B, but will still lose to her 6BB hold. The second hit of Cassandra, her 6BB hold, can be sidestepped to either side, but this will lose to her Divine Force 6B A+B, and most characters will also lose to her 6BB. And you also have the option to interrupt the second hit with an I-12 attack, but this will lose to her 6BB and Divine Force 6B A+B. Or you can use an auto GI for vertical mid attacks to beat the second hit. You can also use a normal GI to beat the second hit, which can also be done after getting hit by the initial 6B. Cassandra, her Divine Force 6B A+B is -12 on block. You can also use a GI to beat the second hit, which will also beat her 6BB, but will lose to her 6BB hold. Cassandra, her 3B is -12 on block. Her 2B is -10 on block and returns her to crouch, which means that Changhua will be able to attempt a low throw, but this will lose to her 2BB. Her 2BB is -20 on block. You also have the possibility to sidestep the second hit to either side for a potentially more damaging punish. You can also interrupt the second hit with an I-10 attack, but this will lose to her Divine Force 2B A+B. And you also have the possibility to beat the second hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks, which will also beat her Divine Force 2B A+B. Or you can use a normal GI to beat the last hit, which will also beat her Divine Force 2B A+B. Cassandra, her Divine Force 2B A+B is -20 on block, but has a lot of pushback. You can also sidestep the second hit to either side, but be aware that the hitbox of the second hit is rather large. And like I mentioned before, you can also beat the second hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks. And of course you can also use the normal GI to beat the second hit, which will also beat her 2BB. Cassandra, her 1B is -16 on block, but returns her to crouch, so you have to punish her with a mid or low. Also be aware that her 1B hold is only -4 on block. And because it returns her to a crouching position, you will be able to attempt low throws after blocking it. Cassandra, her full crouch 3B is -16 on block, but returns to crouch, so you need to punish with a mid or low. And again, because it returns her to crouch, you will be able to attempt low throws. Her full crouch 1B is -12 on block, but has a lot of range, so be sure that you're close enough to punish her. Her 2K, full crouch K and backturn 2K are all -14 on block and return to crouch, so you need to punish with a mid or low. And once more, because it returns her to crouch, you may attempt to low throw her. Cassandra, her 1K is -14 on block. Her full crouch 8K is -24 on block. Her jump KK, which almost looks like a full crouch AK, is also -24 on block, but leaves her a little bit far away from you. And although there is very little reason to do so, you can also GI the second hit. Cassandra, her 8A+B is -14 on block, but be aware that you will be left in crouch. The ground wave of her 8A+B is also -14 on block. It is also possible to GI the ground wave for guaranteed I-16 punish. The ground wave of her 8A+B hold, just like her 8A+B, is also -14 on block. It is also possible to beat the ground wave with a jump attack, just be careful that you won't get hit by the unblockable. And here as well you can GI the ground wave to get the guaranteed 16 frame punish. Cassandra, her B+K is -12 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. Her B+KB is also -12 on block. You can also beat the second hit with a normal GI, but this will lose to her B+KB hold. Her B+KB hold can be sidestepped to either side, but if you do it too early you might lose to her B+KB. You can also interrupt the second hit with an up to I-16 attack, but I suggest you use the I-12 attack to also block punish her B+K, but both will lose to her B+KB. Cassandra, her 6B+K is -12 on block, but has a follow-up which can only be interrupted by tag crouch moves. You can duck the second hit of her 6B+KA. But you also have the option to use an auto GI for horizontal high attacks to beat the last hit. And of course, because auto GIs work, so will normal GIs. You can duck the second hit of Cassandra, her 2-2 AA. Just be aware that she recovers fairly quick. And you can also use an auto GI for horizontal high attacks to beat the second hit. And again, because auto GIs work, so will normal GIs. Cassandra, her 6-6B, is -12 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. The second hit of her 6-6BA can be ducked, but you shouldn't use a move that is slower than I-18 or you might get counter hit by the follow-ups. It is also worth mentioning here that there is no mix-up because her 6-6BB jails. Or you can use an auto GI for horizontal high attacks to beat the second hit. But of course the normal GI will work just fine. You can sidestep the last hit of her BAB to either side, but this only works if you have ducked the high, but will also lose to her 6-6BAK. You can also beat the last hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks, but this as well will only work if you have ducked the second hit and will also lose to her 6-6BAK. Or you can simply GI the last hit, which will also beat her 6-6BAK. Cassandra's 6-6BAK is -12 on block. You can also use a jump attack to beat the last hit for a more damaging punish, but this will lose to her 6-6BAB. And like I've already mentioned, you can also use a GI to beat the last hit, which will also beat her 6-6BAB. Cassandra, her 2-2K, is -18 on block, but has follow-ups which need to be interrupted by an I-16 tech crouch move. You can duck the second hit of her 2-2KK, but this only works if you block the initial low. Also, if you use moves that are slower than I-16, you will get counter hit by her 2-2K hold. After blocking the initial low, you can also beat the second hit with a GI, but this will also lose to her 2-2K hold. Her 2-2K hold can be interrupted by 10 frame attacks after being hit by the initial low, but of course this will lose to her 2-2KK. After blocking the low, you can interrupt the follow-up with an up to I-16 attack, which will preferably be a tech crouch move to also beat her 2-2KK. You can also use an auto GI for horizontal mid kicks to beat the second hit, even after being hit by the first. And yet again, because auto GIs will work, so will normal GIs. Cassandra, her 6-6A+B, is -14 on block, but has quite a bit of range, so make sure you're close enough to block punish her. Her 6-6B+K is -10 on block, but has a little bit of pushback. Her 4-4B+K is -16 on block, but gets safer the further away you are when blocking it. At long range it is actually even safe on block. Her running K, just like most, is -22 on block. Cassandra, her Angel Step A is -16 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. Her Angel Step AB is -18 on block and will leave you in a crouching position. You can also beat the second hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks, but your auto GI will need a 4-frame startup, but will lose to Divine Force Angel Step A+B. You can also use a normal GI to beat the second hit, but this will not work against Divine Force Angel Step A+B, but you should still be able to block it. Cassandra, her Divine Force Angel Step A+B is only -12 on block and will leave you in a crouching position. Her Angel Step B is -16 on block, but recovers fairly quickly, so you need to be fast about punishing her. You can sidestep her Divine Force Angel Step K A+B to either side with characters such as Asta, Haomaru, Hilde, Setsuka and Siegfried, and to the right with characters such as Tira, Shangwa and Zasalamel. Or you can GI the second hit and get a guaranteed I-10 punish. Cassandra, her Angel Twirl B is -12 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. The second hit of Cassandra, her Angel Twirl BB, can be sidestepped. Some characters such as X can step it to their right, others such as Haomaru, Setsuka and Siegfried can step it to their left. But there are also characters that can't step it at all, such as Asta, Hilde, Tira and Zasalamel. You can also beat the second hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks, but this might lose to her Angel Twirl B hold. And you can also use a normal GI to beat the second hit, but this will definitely lose to her Angel Twirl B hold. Cassandra, her Angel Twirl B hold can be sidestepped to either side. And the fully held version can be interrupted by an up to I-22 attack. Cassandra, her Reversal Edge A is -12 on block. Her Reversal Edge K is also -12 on block. All versions of Cassandra's Critical Edge are -18 on block. The last hit of her Soul Charge BBBB can be ducked. And you also have the option to use a normal GI to beat the last hit. Cassandra, her Soul Charge 1KB is -22 on block. It is also possible to sidestep the second hit to either side with most characters to potentially get a more damaging punish. And you also got the option to beat the second hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks. And yet again, because auto GIs work, so will normal GIs. The second hit of Cassandra, her Soul Charge 4B plus KB, can be ducked. And you also have the option to beat the second hit with a normal GI. Cassandra, her Soul Charge Angel Step A plus B is -24 on block. Although it's better to simply block it, you also got the possibility to use a normal GI to beat the second hit. And lastly, one more thing I wanted to mention is that Cassandra, her Soul Charge Angel Step A doesn't have to be RI'd, it actually can be GI'd.